Last year I took a trip around the world. I traveled for 9 months, 14 countries, 3 continents, and it was an absolutely epic adventure. A year later, on October 2nd, when this video goes out, I will have been officially back from my trip for 1 year, which is wild. On top of that, when this video releases on October 2nd, I'm going to be almost on my summit day, going back to Kilimanjaro, back in Tanzania, climbing to the roof of Africa. So I recorded this video a little bit early because I couldn't send this exactly while I'm climbing Kilimanjaro, obviously. But I wanted to, just kind of reflect about the video, the journey that has been, make a video about my experience with returning home after like an epic, almost once in a lifetime adventure, and just kind of share about my experience since returning, and share some thoughts and feedback and suggestions with anybody that might also be considering going on a big trip, or potentially you just came back from a big trip, or maybe a little bit of both. Yeah, last year I went to go travel. I was gone for 9 months. I was in Southeast Asia. I ended up going to kind of like Turkey, Albania, a little bit of the Middle East, Jordan, Egypt, over to East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, a little bit of Europe. But for the most part, it was a bunch of off the beaten path countries. I didn't go to Bali. I didn't go to Europe. I didn't go to like kind of a lot of the hot spots. I wanted to really do my own thing and kind of push what most people do, I think, especially Americans. So I wanted to get out there, and yeah, it was an epic trip. And it's still really weird being back a year later. It's still very odd, honestly, and the repercussions of seeing other places, talking to people from other countries, looking at America from outside, and looking at myself now backwards and also backwards to now is probably one of the weirdest things. And I kind of like relate it to saying that I feel like I'm having a conversation with myself, because who I was a year ago, traveling, staying at hostels, backpacking, not really working, interacting and engaging with a lot of people from other countries, a lot of cultures, and looking at life in America, and thinking about like what life looks like here from out there, and who I became during that trip, talking to now who I've become a year later since being back. It's just really weird, and I'm constantly talking to myself from Zach a year ago to Zach now, and it really feels like this back and forth tug of war between some of the values and perspectives and ideas that I had then and what I have now. And maybe you can relate. I don't know, if you went on a big trip and you like literally changed while you were gone and adapted to this new way of life, and then you come back and you're part of the life here. It's like a very weird thing, honestly. And I had a lot of conflict and issues with looking at my friends and my family when I was out there, being like, y'all don't get it, to like now being back and like me telling myself, bro, you don't get it. So it's one of the weird things that keeps happening. And of course, I'm like always reading my journals and looking at photos and literally time traveling back to this period. So these conversations are kind of constantly always happening, and it's still a struggle. One of the things that I'm grateful for from that trip is that I still like super appreciate the small parts of life. When I got back, there were some things that like are luxuries in other countries that we just take for granted here. For example, I was playing basketball the other day, and we were all like super dying of thirst. It was really hot, and there's just a water fountain right there. You just go to the water fountain, push the thing, drink some fresh water. Sure, it's like pipe water and it's not like uber delicious, but just the fact that there's like easily accessible drinking water in the park is like an insane luxury. And it was those kind of moments where like, wow, like I was in places where this is not possible. You know, a lot of the world doesn't have fresh drinking water so easily accessible. You just turn on the hose, turn on the faucet, drink water out of it. Like the world doesn't have that for the most part. there's not a lot of grass in the rest of the world. Like Austin's so green and there's so much just grass like everywhere in yards and parks and sidewalks, and it's like I'm just like, wow, there's grass all the time. And it's really these kind of like small moments that make it feel like that I don't take for granted. And like the hot shower, almost like for months after getting back, and still I turn on the shower and I take like a really hot, amazing shower, and I don't take it for granted. The fact that there's a water heater that heats up the water that makes for a comfortable shower, and I like really hot showers. And so, you know, I still like a year later, those like the gratitude for these small niceties that we just take for granted. Like I try to not take those for granted. It's the AC, it's the fridge, it's electricity. I mean, it's having a car to just jump in and drive, like all these little things that, you know, they become pretty commonplace, but you know, a lot of the rest of the world doesn't have this. And so it's really, for me, taking moments to like appreciate those and like not forget that this is a luxury that is so common for everywhere here, because we just want to keep adding and adding and more and more and more and nicer and bigger. And I'm like, no, like we have enough. We have so much to be grateful for. You don't need all the rest of that stuff. And I think that's also another thing that I've learned is like gratitude, and like not gratitude for what we have, and also not like striving for more and more and more and more. Like America has this like toxic culture of like bigger, faster, more expensive, like higher pay. Like we just want to keep going and going and going, really for no reason. And yeah, of course that creates a lot of opportunity and, you know, like a lot of really luxurious living, because we're constantly pushing for better, but like at what cost? And so much of the rest of the world can get by with so little, that we don't need all these really big things all the time. And so it's taking that approach for like gratitude, but also not like falling into this rat race, which is really hard. One of the hardest parts about coming back has been this conflict with time, and how time while you're traveling seems to like slow down. The studies that they found about like how to slow down time really revolve around novelty, and when you're experiencing something new, fresh, exciting, that like time kind of slows down, and that when you do more monotonous things, time speeds up. When you're doing the same thing day after day after day after day, like time just goes really quickly. And I swear it's like 100% true that like when you go out and you go travel, time like slows down. It's so weird. And then you go from like molasses time, where you can almost remember every hour, every day, back to back to back days, to coming back, and time is like triple fast forwarded. And it's the weirdest thing that now I've been back like a year, and it's crazy. Like I felt like I was gone forever, and now I've been back longer than I was gone, and it's like flown by. And so I got this tattoo of the hourglass and it going down and breaking, and I just have this kind of feeling around time and making it count, because like while I was traveling, I was always like, I might die tomorrow. Like anybody could die tomorrow. It's always a possibility, and soaking it up and like making life count. And time is crazy, and like now, like it just is flying by, and it's hard because I'm like, well, if I wanted to slow down, I go back out on the road. Like I go back out and travel. I create novelty. I really push for experiences, but it's almost not sustainable. So you have to come back here, but then it's speeding up, and it's once again this like conflict, and it is a really weird thing, because I'm like, where's the time gone? It's just flying, and it's still a hard thing to deal with. Like, honestly, I am like, I can't believe it's already been a year since I've been back. Like I did so much in 9 months, and like what have I done in a year? It's just like a very weird conflict. One of my biggest suggestions for people who are going to go travel is get a film camera. I mean, it'll change your life. At least for me, it did. And one of the coolest things has been coming back and actually, you print out your film. If you're gonna make film, if you're gonna shoot film, like print it out, get the, develop film and put it into a photo album. And so this is the photo album for my trip. This is actually Moshi and Kilimanjaro, which I'm going back to like next week. But shooting film I think was one of the coolest parts about this trip, and having like tangible memories to look back on has been really cool. And a lot of it has been on film, but I realized that I don't look that much back on like the digital version. Like I don't look at the photos as much. I don't do time hop or memories like, almost every day in the past I was doing so much, and every day was a memory, but I don't like look back on it as deeply as I should, which is kind of weird. I mean, it's like, I'm all about memories and creating stories, and like, it's really cool to have them, and they hit at specific times, and you kind of have like these realizations about, wow, like last year I was doing this crazy thing, like hiking Kilimanjaro or jumping off this or riding my scooter across Vietnam or like whatever these things are. But I don't know, it's like life's so busy here that I don't get the time to reflect as much. But really like the film helps, and just keeping the photo album out and actually flipping through and not being on a screen is really nice. But also just going back and looking at Instagram has been cool, but I don't do it enough. I would say one of the hardest parts is the facade of America, like cracking and seeing it from another perspective, and then coming back here and like having to live in it. It's a weird thing to be, when I was traveling, and like the longer I was gone, the more disenfranchised I became with like life in America. And I just looked at it with like pretty disgustful perspectives and just a little bit of shame and just issues. I had a lot of tension with like looking at life here and looking at my friends' life here and my family's life here, and then being like, you don't need to do that, right? And I had conversations with people while I was gone about that, and now that I'm back living in it, I can still feel that perspective and a lot of those emotions that I developed from the outside looking in. But now I'm back here, and I call it like being, outside of the fishbowl is how I like have described it. You're like, you can see life and the culture and like a lot of the stuff from the outside, and like, but now I'm back in it, and it's like this really difficult piece to kind of balance of like being in life here, but like, and not really liking it. Like parts of it are amazing. Like I live in Austin. I have an amazing house. I have an amazing girlfriend. My family's here. I mean, there's like, my life is amazing. And that's really why I stayed, is because I realized that, Austin isn't really like the rest of America, and life here is great. But also like a lot of the stuff that I have problems with like still exists, and I'm like part of the problem. And I realized that I had to come back and like be the solution. Like I couldn't just point my finger and be like, hey, this is your problem. This is America's fault. This is like so disgusting. This is such an issue. Like, pointing. But now like I was like, oh, I have to come back and like point the finger at myself and like be the solution. And honestly, I just like haven't been able to do that as well as I would have liked. And it's been really hard because I'm like, damn, I am the problem. Like all the stuff that I was like having issues with before, it's like, no, like now that's like that's who I am. I'm like a piece of this. And it's a difficult thing to stomach because it's just hard. And it's like the longer I stay, the more I get sucked into that fishbowl, and while simultaneously like knowing that I can just like dip out of the fishbowl. So it's like, I know that there's like another version of life out there that maybe doesn't have all of these things that I'm pointing at, like all these issues, and I can like leave, but it's like, it's becoming harder and harder to leave. And it's once again like this tension between this belief system that I have developed and like now being back inside of the counter belief system, and it's a difficult one, and I think I'm still figuring it out. The other part of this is that like I was moving really fast, so like things changed really quickly, and I was like skimming the surface of a lot of cultures. So inevitably, like a lot of places have issues that are deeper than what I was able to experience. But now it's like I don't know. I have this like almost dreamy version of life that's out there, but I think if I were to actually go out there and like spend more time, it would be different. So I don't know. It's constantly a conflict. And still dealing with it, yeah. So is it worth it? Is going out, booking a one-way flight, going to travel the world and just taking off, is it worth it? And yes, it's absolutely worth it. It's a life-changing experience, and you don't know what's gonna happen on the other side, especially when you leave with like full, we'll see. It just opens you up to like pure life, and you don't know what's gonna happen when you come back. You don't know what's gonna happen while you're out there. It is crazy when you just are like full open and you're like, whatever comes my way is what's gonna happen. So it's a wild thing, and like you're definitely risking a lot because you're gonna change, you're gonna see things differently. You're gonna meet people who make you think about stuff in a new way, and you're not gonna come back the same person. Parts of you will be the same, parts of you will be very different, and it's gonna be hard to come back. The longer you stay away, the harder it will be to come back. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it, and not everybody has the opportunity to do it. Like, very few people have the opportunity and also make the opportunity to do it. So if you have that chance and you're like watching this, you're like, hey man, maybe I should, like, go for it. You only have one life. If traveling is important to you, if collecting new experiences, pushing your comfort zone, doing crazy stuff, seeing the world is like a core value that you think is a big part of you, and you have the chance to go for it, and you have to sacrifice some things back home, you have to sacrifice how things could have been, opportunities, cutting a lot of ties with the other way, because you're going this way, that's the other way. But if you can do it, freaking go for it. It's a wild thing. It's truly a wild thing. Now this is like my second trip, big trip. I've collectively traveled like on a one-way ticket for now like about a year and a half of my life. And I hope to do it again. I really do. Hope to do it again with my family. I think that would be like the coolest next step, and that's kind of what I am strategizing towards. And then maybe once again, and just setting off. And it's been an amazing life-changing experience. And the last trip, like 12 years ago now, birthed my business, Live a Great Story, that I've been doing for 10 years. And this last trip, who knows? I think it's still unfolding. I'm not exactly sure what it has yielded yet. It's still really rough, but it's kind of like a core value for me to like go out there and get it, and see what the world can throw you. So it's a wild thing, but I honestly wouldn't have it any other way.